The text from Alara arrived just as I was pinning the final touches on my latest design. Mom's in the hospital. Thought you should know. Classic Alara, dropping bombs with casual indifference. My hands trembled, sending pins scattering across the studio floor. Before I could process it, my phone buzzed again. Dad's name lit up the screen. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, not since our argument about the family business. Callie, sweetheart. His voice cracked. Your mother's had a fall. They're running tests, but I'm on my way, I said, already gathering my things. Which hospital? Memorial. But listen, there's something else. Dad, I need to pack. I'll be there in 3 hours. I ended the call, knowing I was being short with him, but my mind was racing. 3 years I'd spent building my career in New York, putting distance between myself and the family drama back home. Now it was all collapsing in on itself. My assistant Marco appeared in the doorway. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Family emergency. Can you handle the Wilson account? I tossed him my design portfolio. The measurements are all marked. Just make sure. Go, he said firmly. I've got this. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, my phone buzzed with another text from Alara. By the way, Reid's been asking about you. My stomach clenched. Reid. My ex-fiancé, who'd chosen to stay behind when I left for New York. The man who'd promised to wait, then didn't. Of course he and Alara would still be in touch. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, then stopped. On my desk sat the invitation to next week's fashion showcase, my chance to finally launch my own line. Everything I'd worked for was right there, within reach. But Mom needed me. And something in Dad's voice told me there was more to this situation than a simple fall. Whatever was waiting for me back home, I had a feeling it would change everything. I locked up my studio and stepped into the rain, leaving my dreams temporarily behind. Sometimes coming home isn't a choice, it's an inevitability. Memorial Hospital hadn't changed in 3 years. Same antiseptic smell, same flickering fluorescent lights. I found Dad slumped in a waiting room chair, his usually crisp suit wrinkled, his tie loose around his neck. She's stable, he said before I could ask. But there's more going on than just the fall. I sank into the chair beside him. What do you mean? The doctors found. He stopped, rubbing his face. Maybe we should wait for Alara. Where is she anyway? The words came out sharper than intended. At the office. Someone needs to keep things running. His defensive tone made me sit up straighter. The business? What's wrong with the business? A nurse appeared before he could answer. Mr. Winters? Your wife's awake. Mom looked small in the hospital bed, her usual vibrancy dimmed. When she saw me, her face lit up. My girl came home. Of course I did. I took her hand, noting how thin her wrists had become. What happened? Oh, just a silly fall. She waved dismissively. Your father's being dramatic. But since you're here, she glanced at Dad. Maybe you could look over some paperwork at the office? Just until I'm back on my feet. The way they exchanged looks set off warning bells. What aren't you telling me? Nothing to worry about, Dad said quickly. Just some inventory issues. My phone buzzed. Another text from Alara. Everything under control here. Don't interfere. I showed Dad the message. His face tightened. Your sister's been making changes. Changes? She convinced me to sign over temporary control while your mother was sick. I thought, well, she seemed so confident. Mom's hand tightened around mine. The doctors say I need surgery. We can't afford it, Callie. The business accounts are empty. The pieces clicked into place. Alara's cryptic messages, Dad's exhaustion, the inventory issues. My sister hadn't called me home out of concern. She needed a scapegoat. I need to see those papers, I said, standing. Now. Callie, don't. Dad started, but Mom cut him off. Let her go, Nolan. It's time someone stood up to Alara. I kissed Mom's forehead and headed for the door, my mind already racing. Whatever game Alara was playing, she'd forgotten one thing. I wasn't the same person who'd left 3 years ago. The family business office felt like a tomb. Empty desks, scattered papers, and a layer of dust that spoke of neglect. I found what I was looking for in the bottom drawer of Dad's desk. 3 months of bank statements and a stack of invoices that made my blood run cold. Looking for something specific? I jumped at Reid's voice. He stood in the doorway, looking exactly as he had 3 years ago. Perfectly pressed suit, calculated smile. My ex-fiancé, now apparently Alara's right-hand man. Just catching up on some light reading. I held up an invoice. Like how we supposedly ordered $50,000 worth of fabric from a company that doesn't exist. His smile faltered. That's confidential information. Funny how everything became confidential after Alara took control. I spread the papers across the desk. Where's the money really going, Reid? You left, Callie. You don't get to waltz back in and start making accusations. Mom needs surgery. My voice cracked. The accounts are empty, and I'm looking at fake invoices with your signature on them. He moved closer, reaching for the papers. There's a reasonable explanation. Save it. I snatched the documents away. Where's my sister? Paris, actually. Shopping trip. She said you'd try something like this. The casual way he said it, like my mother wasn't lying in a hospital bed, like our family wasn't crumbling, made something snap inside me. I pulled out my phone and dialed Dad's number. I found proof, I said when he answered. Alara's been embezzling, and Reid's helping her. Reid's face darkened. You really shouldn't have done that. What are you going to do? Fire me? I don't work here anymore, remember? No, he said quietly. But Alara's not the only one with access to old secrets. Like what really happened the night you left town. My hand tightened around the phone. You wouldn't. Try me. He straightened his tie. You have until tomorrow to put those papers back and forget what you saw. For everyone's sake. He left me standing there, surrounded by evidence of betrayal and the sudden, sickening realization that my sister wasn't the only one I needed to worry about. Back at the hospital, I found Mom's room empty, the bed stripped bare. My heart stopped until a nurse pointed me toward the ICU. Complications, she said quietly. Dad sat outside the ICU, his head in his hands. When he looked up, I barely recognized him. The surgery can't wait anymore, he said, but without access to the business accounts. I pulled out the stack of fraudulent invoices. Reid threatened me. Something about the night I left town. Dad's face went pale. He knows about the accident. What accident? Before he could answer, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. A photo appeared. My car, 3 years ago, its front end crushed against a guardrail. Below it, a message. Remember now? I thought we took care of this, Dad whispered. The settlement, the NDAs. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Rain-slicked roads, a figure darting across the street, the sickening crunch of metal. I'd called Dad, panicking. He'd handled everything, made it disappear. I'd left town the next day, too ashamed to face what I'd done. Alara kept evidence. I realized. She's been waiting to use it. If this gets out. Dad's voice trailed off. Through the ICU window, I could see Mom hooked up to machines, fighting for her life. The fashion showcase invitation burned in my bag, my escape route back to New York. But running away hadn't solved anything last time. My phone buzzed again. Reid. Ready to back off yet? I thought of the empty accounts, of Mom needing surgery, of Alara in Paris spending money that wasn't hers. The old shame mixed with new anger, hardening into resolve. I'm not backing off, I told Dad. But I need to know everything about the accident, the settlement, all of it. No more secrets. It could ruin you, he warned. I'm already ruined. I squared my shoulders. But I'm done letting Alara and Reid use the past against us. It's time to fight back. Dad studied me for a long moment, then nodded. There's something else you should know, he said. About the night of the accident. You weren't the only one there. The click of designer heels on hospital linoleum announced Alara's return from Paris. She swept into Mom's room wearing a new Chanel suit that probably cost more than the monthly payroll. Darling, you look terrible, she said, air-kissing my cheek. Have you slept? I stepped back, noting the slight tremor in her perfectly manicured hands. Cut the act, Alara. I know about the money. Do you? She settled into the visitor's chair like it was a throne. And what about what I know? If you're talking about the accident, oh, that's just the beginning. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. Remember this night? You, Reid, that investor's son. Such an interesting evening. My stomach churned. What do you want? The same thing I've always wanted. What's rightfully mine. She glanced at Mom's sleeping form. Did Daddy Dearest tell you who else was there that night? Who really caused the accident? Before I could respond, Mom stirred. Alara, you came. The transformation was instant. Alara's sharp edges softened, her voice honey-sweet. Of course, Mama. I came as soon as I could. Mom reached for both our hands, pulling us closer. My girls together again. I felt Alara's nails dig into my palm behind Mom's back. A warning. The doctors say I can have the surgery next week, Mom said hopefully. Once the insurance. Actually, Alara interrupted. I've taken care of everything. Called in some favors. My head snapped up. What favors? She smiled, all teeth. Let's discuss it outside. In the hallway, she dropped the pretense. Here's the deal. You back off about the business, keep your mouth shut about the accounts, and Mom gets her surgery. Otherwise. She shrugged. Well, accidents happen. Sometimes twice. The threat hung between us, but something in her voice caught my attention, a hint of desperation beneath the confidence. What aren't you telling me, Alara? For a split second, fear flashed across her face. Then her phone buzzed, and when she checked it, she went pale. We're out of time, she whispered, more to herself than me. They're coming. Two men in dark suits appeared at the end of the hospital corridor. Alara grabbed my arm, pulling me into the stairwell. Those aren't just debt collectors, she hissed. I borrowed from people you don't want to know about. How much? My voice echoed in the concrete space. Enough to make the business accounts look healthy in comparison. She leaned against the wall, her designer facade cracking. I needed to prove I could handle things better than you. By getting involved with loan sharks? They weren't supposed to be loan sharks. Her voice cracked. Reid said they were private investors. He promised. The stairwell door opened. Reid stepped in, followed by the two suits.
Sorry, ladies.
Time's up. You set her up, I realized, watching his practice smile. You knew exactly who these people were. Business is business. He straightened his tie. And your sister made it very easy. One of the suits spoke. The property deed will cover the debt. Sign it over now, or we go public with everything, the accident, the embezzlement, all of it. I looked at Alara, really looked at her. Behind the expensive clothes and perfect makeup, I saw something familiar, the same desperate need for approval I'd run from 3 years ago. There's another way, I said quietly. Don't, Alara warned. You can't fix this. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. The number in my account represented 3 years of savings, my entire future in New York, the fashion showcase that could launch my career. This covers half, I said, showing them the screen. I'll sign over my stake in the business for the rest. Callie, no. Alara started. Shut up. I turned to Reid. You get what you wanted, control of the company. But you leave my family alone. All of us. He studied me for a moment, then nodded to the suits. As they drafted the paperwork on their phones, I watched my dreams disappear with a few digital signatures. Why? Alara whispered when they left. Because you're still my sister. I headed for the stairs. But after this, we're done. Callie, wait, she grabbed my arm. There's something else you need to know about the accident. About who was really driving that night. It was Reid. Alara's words echoed in the stairwell. He was driving your car that night. I was in the passenger seat. The world tilted sideways. What? You were passed out in the back. We were supposed to get you home safely, but Reid was showing off, driving too fast. Her voice cracked. When we hit that person, he panicked. We switched seats, put you behind the wheel. The memory I'd buried for 3 years shattered, revealing new fragments. Reid's cologne, Alara's frightened whispers. The sound of car doors opening and closing before the police arrived. Dad paid everyone off, she continued. Reid threatened to expose the whole thing if we didn't give him what he wanted. That's why I let him help with the business, why I had to keep borrowing money. The stairwell door burst open. Reid stood there, phone in hand. Touching confession. Want to hear how it sounds on recording? You're done, I said, stepping toward him. I'll tell everyone the truth. With what proof? Your father destroyed the evidence years ago. He smiled that practice smile. Face it, Callie. You lost. The business is mine, your reputation is in my hands, and your sister's debt ensures she'll do exactly what I say. Actually, a new voice said, that's not quite true. Dad emerged from the lower landing, holding up his phone. The recording light blinked red. Reid's smile faltered. Mr. Winters. I kept everything, Dad said quietly. Every document, every photo, every statement from that night. I knew someday one of you would try to use it against my daughters. Alara grabbed my hand. For the first time since we were children, I didn't pull away. It's your choice, Reid, I said. Walk away now, from the business, from our family, from everything. Or we all go down together. He looked between us, father and daughters united at last, and something in him broke. Without another word, he turned and left. In the silence that followed, Alara whispered, I'm sorry. For everything. I know. I squeezed her hand. Me too. The truth hadn't set us free, but it had given us somewhere to start. 6 months later, I stood in my studio, pinning the final touches on a wedding dress. Not mine. Those dreams had died with Reid's betrayal. This one was for a paying client, the first of many since reopening the business under a new name, Winters and Sterling Designs. The door chimed. Alara walked in, carrying 2 coffee cups and a thick envelope. Mom's latest test results, she said, handing them over. All clear. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The surgery worked. Thanks to you. She set down her coffee, fingers tracing the beadwork on the dress. I found something else too. In Mom's old papers. She pulled out a weathered envelope. Inside was a sketch, my first design, drawn on the back of a receipt when I was 12. Below it, in Mom's handwriting, my girls will build something beautiful together. She knew, Alara said quietly. Even back then. The bell chimed again. Dad walked in, looking younger than he had in months. The bank approved the loan. We can buy back the warehouse. Actually, I said, I have another idea. I pulled out my own envelope, the reissued invitation to the New York Fashion Showcase. We could expand instead. Open a second location. Alara's eyes widened. You trust me to run things here? Trust is earned. I met her gaze. But so is forgiveness. She nodded, understanding the weight of both. As they left to celebrate over lunch, I noticed a familiar car passing by Reid, watching from across the street. He'd been showing up lately, testing the boundaries of our warning. But his power over us was gone, buried with the truth we'd chosen to keep. My phone buzzed with a text from Marco in New York. Ready when you are, boss. I looked around the studio, at the wedding dress waiting for final touches, the sketch from my childhood, the sign bearing both family names. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about building something stronger from the ruins they left behind. I picked up my coffee, took a sip, and got back to work. There were dresses to finish, bridges to rebuild, and a future to design, on my own terms.